But first of all, the principle base, which economic impact, every professor can teach principle. Second, we focus practice. First of all, the principle base, which anybody can teach, and every professor can teach principle. Second, we focus practice. You can learn different tools. We create data sets, support vector machine, self-organized map, logistic regression, blah blah blah. Could be simply support vector machine, self-organized map, problem-based, logistic regression, blah blah blah. How to use data. Hey, go back to your own. Third, problem-based. Collect your own data. How to use data. Hey, go back to your own failed problem. Collect your own data. I don't know what data. This is a company CEO. Hey, give me a data. Most people, I hire you to get data yourself. Third stage. I don't know what data. Yes, this is a company CEO. Hey, give me a data. What? Nobody teaches you. I hire you to get data yourself. Most people wait for their data coming. Yes, go hunt data. Fourth, nobody teaches you to hunt data. Most people wait for other data to repeat 1, 2, 3. I go 4P now, right? Fourth, principle professional. Practice-based, teach other people repeat 1, 2, 3. I go 4P now. Then you are ready to principle-based, practice-based, and problem-based.
Very nice thought, very powerful thought. Thanks, Professor Lee, for that. And you know, Professor Hausman, I don't know how much, I mean, very nice to what thought, degree you agree and you won't be able to add more there. But here's the question, right? Professor Hausman, I don't know how much, that these are what degree you agree and you won't be able to add more there. But here's the question, right? From a university or a set of universities need to be present in an AI skills to a data factory producing some of these AI winners. University or a set of university gaps that exist, right? AI skills to a data factory producing some of these AI winners. There will be skill gaps that exist, right? How does a state, how does a well-meaning leader address some of those skill gaps?
Saying something so let me start by, I don't know, maybe you're saying something, you're younger than me, maybe they didn't teach you in school calligraphy. I don't know, maybe you're, because you're younger than me, calligraphy anymore because we don't write with our hands, right? We type, right? So we don't teach calligraphy anymore because that are just not going to be needed, right? And we type. And one of the things that, for example, so there's some skills that are just not going to be needed, answering questions. And one of the things that, for example, large language models are very good at measure how much our students learn by posing them questions and see if they answer questions. Measure how much our students learn. We do that even in our PhD programs during the first 2 years of the PhD program. They take courses, we ask questions. We do that even in our PhD programs during the first 2 years of the PhD program. They take courses, we ask questions, thesis, and they have to answer questions. The problem, but after they finish their courses and they have to do answer questions. Thesis, it's how to ask. The problem that they face is no longer and how to answer it questions. Is in the finding the right questions, right? If you want to query a large language model, how to finding the right questions, right? So where are your questions coming from? Query, how to teach a large language model to learn how to do with questions, right? So where are your questions coming from? How questions you ask about the world, right? To learn, what is it that you want to learn, right? What are the kinds of questions I think that there's a dimension. What is it that many students that perform spectacularly in their first 2 years of their PhD? A dimension. By the way, many students they cannot go from very good at answering first 2 years of their PhD. Then fail because they cannot go from very good at answering somebody else's questions. The higher the price. So I think that the more AI we are the ones asking questions, the higher the price of being good at asking. The better the AI tools, in some sense, we are the ones asking the questions. And the skill of asking questions. The better the AI tools will be, kind of get the more skills going in students. I would love to know what are the right questions to ask. How do I do that? If a student after 2 years is not able to do that, I would love to know how do you make it as a normal program, linear program. If a student after 2 years is not able to do that in third year, how do you make it as a normal program, linear program? We want to revolutionize everything. So, but let me tell you, we have not been able to. We want to revolutionize everything. But overcome the apprenticeship model. We have not been even in our PhD programs. Okay, we put them for 2 years in apprenticeship. These days, even in our PhD in economics lasts 6 years. So 2 years in school, 2 years in and the other 4 these days it's in an apprenticeship program where we don't know how to teach this stuff. 2 years in school, and the other 4 years it's in an apprenticeship program where we don't know how to teach this an apprentice. The only thing you can pick it up by seeing other people doing. I would even criticize my own. So it's an apprentice, even when we teach economics, I would even criticize my own profession, saying, even teach how these models can answer what-if questions. We teach. But when you go to the world, nobody tells you how these models can answer what-if questions. So you have to figure out, there's this. But when you go to the world, the shoe hurts, etc. But I don't know what the model is. I don't know what the data is. I don't know what the problem is. I have to figure it out. The shoe hurts, etc. But I don't know what the model is. I don't know what the data is. I don't know what the problem is. I have to figure out how to structure your mind around them, how to find pathways to finding problems in the world, figuring out what it is that your mind around them, how to find pathways to is what's going to be at a premium. And that's change of what it is that you're going to do to figure things out.
Now, I'm going to come to regulation and threats as well. But since we spoke about industry, Professor Lee spoke about industry. Now I'm going to come to regulation and threats as well, but since we spoke about industry, and Professor Lee spoke about industry, I'd like to come to you. What does a nation have to do to make it economically viable as well? Because you do this for a living per se, right? What are the critical elements that a state like Andhra Pradesh, for example, has to do in order to create a thriving AI ecosystem? What are the critical elements that a state like Andhra Pradesh, for example, having the adequate in order to create a thriving AI ecosystem, which is economically viable as well? Fundamentally sound, having the adequate skill sets for people, at the same time, economically viable as well.
Mentioned the most essential thing is around outcomes. What outcomes are we trying to solve? So that is the most essential thing is around outcomes. But what outcomes are we trying to is the nation trying to solve? So that is at the highest level, nation and AI nation is that enable those having a skill, make the nation and AI nation ecosystem of entrepreneurs, having a skill of researchers who can having that basically ecosystem of entrepreneurs, of VCs, of researchers who can eventually it is also about the access to compute. So to enable those data factories, those AI factories, eventually it is also about the access to compute, the production of AI. So to enable those data factories, those AI factories, important to think about it that you need the production of ecosystems, the data, the infrastructure. Important to think about it that you need the business ecosystem that can enable that data, that can enable infrastructure, the skill set in the workforce. I truly believe that can enable that factory, that can enable that growing tech sector can indeed play a very pivotal role not only for itself but for the global AI landscape. Tech sector can indeed play a very pivotal role not only for itself but for the global AI landscape there. And then of course processing and that data, managing that data, basically the availability of insights from that is what processing that data, managing that data, tokens or intelligence. So in harnessing insights from that is raw material is data. Output is tokens or intelligence. So in the factory, this AI for the raw material is data for various sectors, tokens or intelligence, healthcare, education were mentioned earlier. And then for the industry be used for various sectors, I think this agriculture, healthcare, education were mentioned earlier. Business ecosystems, data, infrastructure. I think this is basically the key ingredients.
A couple of other key elements for
business
this would
ecosystems,
be
data,
cybersecurity. Mr. Lokesh, please feel free to come in whenever, but one of the two things is cybersecurity and the regulation for this should be put in place. So cybersecurity. Professor Saskin, the question that I've whenever, but one of the two things is cybersecurity and the regulation that should be put in place. So, Professor Saskin, the question that I've noted down for you, and I'd like to ask you, in place is for any ecosystem to ensure its ethical use, AI regulation that should be and a fit and proper use. I mean, if any ecosystem to ensure its ethical use, what are the regulations that should be put in and a fit and proper use? I mean, if you broadly understand what I'm trying to ask, I mean, what are the regulations that should be put in?
Putting the cart ahead of the horse? Or should regulations
I think
is it too early?
Is it too early?
Putting the cart ahead of the horse?
There is a lot of discussion today about the sort of technical limits to AI. There is a lot of discussion and cannot be automated about the sort of technical limits to AI. And every day we're what can and cannot be automated. New tasks and activities. But I think systems can take on. Every day we're making medical diagnoses, new tasks, composing jokes, writing legal arguments, designing buildings. It's a sort of bafflingly impressive composing jokes. But I think writing legal arguments, designing buildings. It's a sort of bafflingly impressive list. But I think technical limits, but the moral limits, not what these technologies can and cannot do. Focusing on not the technical limits, but the moral and should not these technologies can and cannot do. We already what they should these questions and should not do. There are systems in the US that are used to. We already AI systems that are used to inform parole decisions. There are systems in the US that are used to. How would we feel about using a system AI AI systems that are used to inform parole decisions. Probably far less comfortable with that. There are systems in the medical setting which say like medical diagnoses, and we might think probably far less comfortable. A terrific thing. There are systems in the medical about using a system in a hospital to make medical diagnoses to decide whether or not to turn off light support systems. How would we feel about the available data in a hospital, scarce beds, to decide whether or not to turn off light support? Probably far less based on all the available data about I think these sort of scarce beds, vitals, technology, demand, and so on. Probably far less comfortable. Already binding us on us, and in a way, limits to these technologies, the technical limits to these systems and it's already binding us on us, and in a way, are kind of far more important moral limits that need to be reflected in sort of regulatory regimes that we that we design. But exactly as you say, the challenge regulatory regimes that these technologies that we design. But we are regulating. The challenge if we attempt to regulate, we are going to be regulating something that we don't quite know. We are regulating. If we attempt to regulate, you only regulate about all the different ways in which the generative systems of the last few years have taken us by surprise. And you only need to think about all the different ways in which the generative systems of the last few years have taken us by surprise.
So, Professor Kreis, if we do this and try to put regulations, are we putting the cart before the horse or no? And part two, Professor Kreis, if we do look at cybersecurity so regulations, are we putting the cart before the horse or no? And part two, because you look at cybersecurity so closely, and she was of the belief that while there is a 44% rise in cyber attacks across the world in 2024, and she was of the belief that while there is a 44% rise in cyber attacks of these in the future as well, and there's a possibility to defend as well by use of AI. So both possibility of these in the future as well. There's a possibility to defend as well.
So I will do my best.
So both these questions too.
On the first question, are we regulating really hard to answer? So I will do my best. Well, yes and no. I mean, it depends what you're regulating. Are we regulating too early? Well, what we have to do. I mean, it depends what you're regulating. I'm going to go through the cybersecurity piece, and then we'll get to the answer. So when I think about AI and cybersecurity, I'm going to go through the cybersecurity piece, and then we'll get to the answer. Three general areas where these two things are coming together. The one I'm not going to speak so much about points of a triangle is the use of machine learning and AI these two things are coming together. The one I'm not going to speak so much about our ability to protect is the use of machine learning and AI that's been to enhance our cyber defense capabilities. As my daughter says, since the protect our systems, that's been happening since the last century. As my daughter says, because we're going to have to match up to some pretty, and it will continue to happen, voracious and strong, because we're going to have to match up to some pretty, there's kind of two areas we have to be really concerned about right now. So one is, there's kind of two areas we have to be really concerned about right now. Of course, yes. One is, whenever we embrace new technology, could our use of AI change technology? There's of course the potential for new vulnerability. Whenever we embrace new technology, or whether the highly regulated technology, like for example, the potential for new vulnerability. The financial sector, which grew a lot of the highly regulated maturity in the profession. Like, for example, the financial sector, which grew a lot of the growth and maturity in the profession, kind of before 2010 in the early 2000s, since before the term cybersecurity, when we were all working in information assurance. Inside those regulations and good practices, we did things like make sure if you have a big system upgrade, you're going to test it, you'll pen test it. This is security testing, this is looking for vulnerability. All of those good things we see translating into the recommendations for good practice around security of AI. But there's some challenges for us. There's something very different about the way in which machine learning and AI works. We know that they're inherently vulnerable, and we can see in the research, security research community, both in industry and academia, and in government, examples of how people are managing to compromise systems, either via the training data, or via the inference engine, or via the model. Once this stuff's in use, of course, your operational security head will be thinking about insider threats, people just conventionally being able to get access and modify, sabotage systems. What can they then do with that? So we have a challenge. Some of these vulnerabilities are new, and they're an evolution of an old type, but the way in which we bring them about and consider whether they can be exploited to do us harm, that's knowledge we're learning, and we're learning fast. Some of the work that's out there exploring the general framework of vulnerability, which could help all of us procure AI, driven by our appetite for risk or risks we want to avoid, that's showing us that there are similarities across different kind of models and machine learning. So that's really interesting in terms of vulnerability. So you can have a very different machine learning problem, a different vertical, different technology solution, and yet they're vulnerable to a similar attack. Okay, so that's positive in that whatever we do to develop protection is translatable. Negative in that the attacker community, therefore, might only need to learn one kind of attack tool, one weaponization strategy, and attack multiple sites. So that's the other corner of the triangle. What's this doing to the toxicity of cyberspace in which our organizations are going to operate? And that's worrying because machine learning has been used for years, on and off, to enhance attacks. And what we're seeing in the advent, the big investments happening in large language models is, of course, opportunities for attackers to predict our vulnerability better, because they can predict more about us as humans and the way in which we live. And if you can do that, you can target people, and often people are the way into the enterprise. But you can possibly also use this stuff to understand our playbooks, how we defend our enterprises. And if you can do that, and you can predict what I'm going to do to defend myself, then maybe you can influence me to do something else, which makes me vulnerable in a different way. Or you can design your attack strategy that makes it way more potent against me. So there's some concerning things here which we will have to deal with from the outset. And then I know I've been talking for too long. So now I'm going to return to the cart before the horse question. It's this. We have to think about how we protect ourselves in a number of ways. There's been a lot of talk in shift left amongst the community, and the WEF has been doing brilliant work in helping us understand. By shift left, we mean push the issue of security earlier on in the development cycle. Shift left for you, which means security by design in every way. But then what we have to do is not just stick with shift left, we have to expand right and do way more in terms of operational security around the stuff when it's in place, in practice. Otherwise, someone's going to hack your system and cause you a big problem. And then you have to kind of constantly repeat, because these things are changing so fast. And the organization is changing fast in terms of what it wants to do. The threat environment's changing really fast. And then the AI technology business is going to bring about massive change. And you know what? We're going to be collecting all sorts of new data we never thought we were going to. And our staff are changing fast. So probably there is something right now in that process, how we're going about doing security by design, embedding as much prevention of vulnerability as we can. Maybe there's something that could be done there. That would not be cart before horse in my mind. But this whole question about how you use things like regulation really needs embracing in the context of this fast, dynamic cadence that we're going to need. It's going to need more than that, right? We're going to have to build norms of behaviors. We're going to have to think about how we get business leaders totally engaged to build cultures in organizations that are inherently secure and resilient inside their DNA and the way people are thinking, because we won't be able to keep pace if we are solely focused on things like law and regulation and things like that.
Okay. We have last 3 minutes, and before I ask the final question to Minister Lokesh, anybody else wants to weigh in on the threats? Because we've spoken enough about this, but otherwise, Mr. Lokesh, my last question is to you. India has this AI mission, government of India, right? Compute capacity for the country. Some thoughts on that, and of course, how is the state collaborating with the center in order to help or do all of these things?
I mean, India's AI mission is the first step in the right direction, but I think we need to do a lot more.
Of course.
No second thoughts about it. I mean, that's why we have the panel here, because I wanted to hear from the experts on how should a state in India transform its entire approach to education, apart from creating a temple of excellence of higher learning and AI university. Apart from that, how do we transform education fundamentally? And how do I create next generation job creators and job seekers for jobs that we don't know? And that for me is fundamentally scary. And that's the thing that we are sort of grappling with as a state. And I think that's what also makes it very exciting for us. India has been a biggest beneficiary of the Y2K way back in 2000. And then, of course, we moved on to various other services. And now I think AI presents a unique opportunity for India, again, to leapfrog. But we also believe that AI should be a way of life. A housewife should be able to understand, use it. As I said in my opening remarks, a carpenter, a student for better understanding of concepts. Politicians should ethically use it. We've seen deep fakes coming in with generative AI. We've seen it especially in the last elections. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty ahead of us, but I think it's very interesting times. And I think, as you've said, how do we create a framework for all of us to sort of operate it? And it doesn't create any ethical and moral dilemma and physical harm at the end of it.
Powerful thoughts here from a lot of answers that have come in for what a state can do, collaborating with other stakeholders to create the next generation AI winners, Professor Lee. I use that term very carefully now. But to all of you, thank you so much for joining in today and giving us your thoughts. Really appreciate your time. Shilpa, thanks so much for joining virtually as well. Great having you.
Right. Thank you very much.
Yep, and everybody, thanks for joining. A round of applause for the panel, please.